Hello, fellow YouTubers. This is DVD Collector 1986. I'm here today with a new video for you. I'm going to be um, doing a one of those top 20 videos. I was sitting on the couch earlier today, and I was watching The Crow actually, and I got this idea. Lots of other people have done it. But I thought, it'd be really cool if I did a top 20 video of my top 20 favorite horror films. And and then from there, I thought, there's a lot of horror documentaries too, documentaries that pertain to certain horror franchises and whatnot. And I thought, you know, how can I incorporate all this into one video? So I thought I'll do top 20 favorite horror films, and then in the same video I'll show 5 other titles, and those other 5 will be my top 5 horror documentaries that I really enjoy. And I'm going to also show one honorable mention, and then after that, we'll get into the list. But the way I decided to do this list was obviously everything in this list is going to be a movie that I obviously own. Number 2, the movie has to be something for me that has a very, very high rewatchability factor. And number 3, I tried to not put more than one movie from the same franchise in the list, if that makes sense. So, for instance, my honorable mention is the exception to that rule, and there's 2 other movies in the entire list of movies I'm going to show you that that are from the same franchise. So other than those 2 movies and the honorable mention, everything else is its own separate movie from its own franchise, or if it's a standalone movie, whatever. But I tried not to put multiple films from the same franchises in the list. Couldn't help it with one of the choices, but with everything else, I tried to not do that. So, and again, this list is subjective. I'm sure as I go through it, you're going to be like, or even when I'm finished, you're going to be like, oh my God, how could he not include this movie or that movie or whatever? But people that really, really know me, which, they know my taste in movies. And if you know my taste in movies, you'll completely understand why these movies are on the list and why certain other ones aren't. Now, that being said, my allergies are bothering me also today. So if you see me sniffing or whatever, I apologize. Um, but what I was going to say was that for movies that I guarantee you're going to think, oh, how come this movie wasn't included or that one? Rest assured, I love those movies too. It's just I had to narrow this down to 20, and that was really hard to do. I was going to do a top 40, maybe a top 30, but then I thought, no, 20 is a good even round number. So if the movie's not on the list, that doesn't mean that I don't like it. It just means that it's not in my top 20, but I still love it. I'm going to go down from number 20 to number 1. But before I do that, I want to show my honorable mention. Now, you're going to freak when you see my honorable mention, but you'll understand why towards the end of the video, why I chose this as an honorable mention. So my honorable mention goes to John Carpenter's Halloween, and not the original Halloween, the extended edition, which is the the version that has all the like the 12, I think it's 12 minutes. Uh, yeah, it's like about 12 minutes or so of additional footage, what John Carpenter referred to as carpet footage, because when um, NBC bought the rights to this movie in 1980 to show it on television, there wasn't enough runtime for this movie to fit its time slot. So he had to basically film additional scenes and splice them into the movie to make the movie longer to fit the allotted runtime. And it just so happens that they were filming Halloween 2 at the same time that he was also filming the additional scenes to put into this movie. So um, the reason I prefer this movie is because over the theatrical is because it has more scenes with Donald Pleasance in it, and you can never get enough Donald Pleasance in these movies, as far as I'm concerned. So I love the original, but my honorable mention goes to this one. So that's my honorable mention. Okay, so now getting into the top 20 list. Again, these will be from number 20 down to number 1. I'm not going to say the numbers, I'm just going to go down the list. So from 20 to number 1. Um, Terrifier. This is an independent horror film about a demented killer clown. His name is Art, and I really enjoyed this film because it's independent. If you've watched this movie before, it has an aura of menace to it. It starts out, these girls go to a pizza parlor after some kind of Halloween party, and while they're there, this guy dressed up like a clown shows up, follows them into the parlor, and let's just say there's a really gross scene involving a bathroom, and we'll call them finger paintings by Art, and really gross scene. But that's one of the things about this movie I like, is it's very unsettling. The whole movie has this like I said, this aura to it where you just know there's a sense of dread. You know something's not right, and it becomes your basic slasher because they end up in this abandoned warehouse with the clown, and the clown tries to kill them, and um, it gets pretty brutal, but um, it's probably one of the better horror films I've seen in recent years. This came out. When did this come out? 2018. Yeah, so not too long ago, and it's this is region free, by the way. What's the name of the? In case somebody wants to check this out. Um, yeah, Dread Central presents Terrifier, and it's released by a movie called Epic, and I don't remember their exact website. I don't want to misquote it, but just go on Yahoo and type in Epic Films, and I'm sure you'll find their website. And they don't just sell this movie. They have other titles too, really good ones. And um, this is I wanted to put a more recent movie on the list, and so this was it. This is a Even though this is a messed up movie, there's a certain charm to it. It feels like an '80s slasher, and I can go back and I can watch this movie a lot. This is definitely a movie that I gravitate towards. Again, some pretty messed up um, scenes in it, pretty brutal, at certain parts, but I like the characters, and it's a pretty good movie. So, Terrifier. Next, again, I wish this could have been higher on the list, but like I said, I still love all these movies in this list, and even movies that aren't on this list. But The Crow, Brandon Lee, uh, his last film, he just knocked it out of the park as Eric Draven, The Crow. And I love this movie for its atmosphere, um, and I don't want to get too technical, but the cinematography, the way the camera is used, the way the story's told, characters, and it's essentially a revenge movie, but at the same time, it's like um, a dark gothic horror film with sort of a superhero twist, kind of. If you were to cross, uh, this is going to sound weird, but if you were to cross Underworld with Batman, you might get something similar to this. But again, this movie had to be on the list. I really, really enjoy this movie, and matter of fact, like I said um, earlier in the video, I was actually watching this movie and earlier, and this movie gave me the idea to do this list. So, The Crow. Um, Phantasm 2. I love all the Phantasms, the tall man, and all that, but whenever I just want to go in my room and grab a random Phantasm movie to watch, this is the one that I typically reach for. Uh, y'all all know the story of the tall man, and this is the movie where Reggie gets his 4-barrel shotgun, which I think is awesome. And to me, this is the best of the Phantasm films. That's subjective, that's my opinion, but that's really how I feel about this movie. So it's on the list. Next up is James Cameron's Aliens, the special edition, which is the extended cut. If you haven't figured it out, I have a soft spot for extended cuts of movies. Um, I think it fleshes out the movies more, it tells more story, you get more scenes. And ultimately, if it's a movie that you love, my wish when it comes to movies like that is I wish the movie was longer. So that's why if it's a movie I like, I watch the extended cut because there's more movie there to watch. Um, but this is a great, it's more of a sci-fi action, but it is a horror film as well. Um, you have two camps. You have people that like aliens, um, which I'm one of those, or you also have people that prefer the first Alien. Um, I love the first Alien, but I love this movie better. And you've got James Cameron directing. You got James Horner doing the score. You've got Sigourney Weaver. You've got Bill Paxton. You've got Michael Biehn. You've got Lance Henriksen. I mean, what? And Jeanette Goldstein, I think is her name, playing Vasquez. I mean, what more could you ask for in an 80s sci-fi action horror film? I mean, this movie, I'm sorry, but I'm going to say it. This is just my opinion, but for me, this is like the perfect sequel to Alien. And because of that, I think, everybody always says, oh, the sequels never outdo the original. Yes, they do on occasion. And for me, personally, this is one of the rare examples where a sequel outdoes the original. And I'll watch Aliens over the first Alien any day of the year. I love Aliens. Matter of fact, This is one of the first horror films I ever watched as an 8-year old child. And one, it got me into horror films. And two, it got me into realistic action movies. Because if you've watched this movie, you know that not all the good guys live at the end. I get sick and tired of these stupid, you know, poorly done action movies where all the good guys always live at the end. And don't get me wrong, there's happy endings in movies have their place, but you know, realistically, the good guy doesn't always live. He might succeed, but he doesn't always live, and that's why I this extends over into war films. I like war films with realism. Lone Survivor, 13 Hours, Black Hawk Down, Saving Private Ryan, even Gladiator, which I consider a war film. I mean, you know what I mean. If you've seen those films, there's a realism to them, and this was really one of the first uh, fictional action movies that took itself seriously, and you know you actually felt bad when the characters started getting killed off. And who can forget the most, the coolest uh, send off of a character? Bill Paxton, man, when the aliens were getting him, man, he went down fighting. And if you've seen this movie, you know what I'm talking about. And that, for me, to this very day, is still the coolest scene in the movie. I love that scene. So you can clearly see I have a love for this film. So that's why it had to be on this list. But Aliens is awesome, and if you haven't seen it, don't watch the theatrical. Watch the special edition, which has yeah, it says includes 17 minutes of restored footage. So this version is like 17 minutes longer than the theatrical. And if you think 17 minutes isn't a lot of footage, sit down, start a stopwatch at 0, and sit there and wait for the watch to reach 17 minutes. 17 minutes is a lot of footage. Excellent movie. Next, a John Carpenter film, The Thing. You're going to see several John Carpenter titles pop up in this list, so don't be surprised. Kurt Russell, it's set in Antarctica. There's this creature, and it can change itself into just about anything, including people, and there's a atmosphere of menace and paranoia, and you don't know who the thing is, and it changes from person to person, and it's just really, a really good movie. The practical effects, there's no CGI in this. I love the practical effects, and the characters are awesome. And I love horror films that are set in the winter or the cold or snowy environments, all that kind of stuff. Horror films that deal with that, I love them. So The Thing. Here's a remake, Dawn of the Dead. I prefer this over the original. The original was just too goofy, too campy. Uh, you'll know if you like more modern takes like this movie as opposed to the originals. If you find originals kind of cheesy, you'll know why I prefer this movie. Not to say that I don't like the original to some capacity, but the original just didn't take itself too seriously for me, and it just became this goofy um, thing at the end where this stupid motorcycle gang comes in there and tears everything up, and they start making fun of and throwing things at the zombies, putting pies in their faces, and I know I'm talking about the original, but I'm just saying this movie, on the other hand, is much more serious. There's nothing funny in this movie. And Vig Rhames is in it, and it's directed by Zack Snyder. And if you get the Shout Factory version, which is this, you actually get two different cuts of the film. So this is one of my all-time favorite zombie films. Um, this one and one other one, which is also on the list, but we'll get to that one later. But I had to put this on the list. I love the setting of the mall, and I love how eventually they run out of supplies in this mall of all places, and then they have to figure out, well, we can't stay here, and the way they try to escape. And if you know how the movie ends, bold, bold ending, the choice that the makers of this film made to give it that ending. I'm not going to ruin it for you, but it's a pretty good. I know there's a lot of diehard fans out there of the original, but give this movie a chance if you haven't seen it. I guarantee you'll see why there's a lot of people that like this remake. Even people that like the original like this one too. So, Dawn of the Dead, the remake, which came out in 2004, if I'm not mistaken. 2004. Next, a movie by, what's his name? Kevin Tinney, Night of the Demons. This is a classic 80s horror flick. I love horror films in the 80s. You've got this group of kids, and they decide to throw a Halloween party inside an abandoned funeral home, of all places, called Hull House. And there are these evil spirits or entities or whatever that reside at this abandoned house, and the kids go there. They throw a party. They make lots of noise, and they disturb the evil that's in the house, and they slowly but surely start getting possessed one by one by one, and it's like a slasher film with evil spirits, and I love this film. It has a slight campiness to it, um, that's characteristic of movies of this type that came from the 80s, like this one. And I just love everything about this film. And the effects were pretty good. And they made Angela's her name, look pretty gnarly. Um, anyway, I love this film, so I had to put it on the list. Night of the Demons. And that's from 1988, I believe. Next up, like I said, you're going to see several John Carpenter titles on this list. And so the next one is Prince of Darkness, which is a John Carpenter film. And uh, that man right there is why I love this film. Donald Pleasance, I'm a huge fan. I've said this many times before, but he worked with John Carpenter quite a bit in different movies. He was in this movie. He was in several of the Halloweens, and he was also in Escape from New York. And he worked with John Carpenter quite a bit over the years, and they became really good friends. And if you're not watching, the Halloween movies, like you're like, okay, I know he's in those, but what's another really good horror film that Donald Pleasance has been in other than the Halloween movies? I would recommend this. And check that out. Donald Pleasance saves the day at the end of the movie, so that's why he's my all-time horror hero, but Prince of Darkness. And I don't remember. Oh, okay, there it is. This movie came out in 1987. So there you go. Next is a horror anthology called Trick or Treat. I love horror anthologies. I love like Tales from the Crypt, Creep Show, all that. But I love this one a lot. And all the stories fit together perfectly. The way they wrap together, all the stories, how they all get wrapped up at the end of the movie, the characters, all the stuff that happens, and how all the stories are kind of interconnected because they all take place in the same town. Uh, I don't want to give too much away. I mean, I could, but I don't want to ruin it for people that haven't seen it. But if you're just getting into horror and you want a really good uh, movie to pop in and watch on Halloween or during the month of October, and like I said, if you're like new to horror, definitely pick this up. It's really good, and it's kind of like a horror version of Pulp Fiction, if that makes sense. Really good horror anthology. Trick or Treat. Now, I don't have these in individual cases. The movie from this collection that I want to mention, and I know a lot of other people like this one as well, but um, people have heard me talk about Friday the 13th Part 8 a lot, how much love I have for that movie. But in recent viewings, I still like Friday the 13th Part 8. But if I had to pick one definitive Friday the 13th movie, for me, it would be Part 4. That's Friday the 13th, the final chapter. There's not much that needs to be said about that. If you haven't seen that movie yet, at this point, what rock have you been living under, but anyway, Friday the 13th, the final chapter, I had to put that on the list. Next, some Adam Green, Hatchet 2. Did he direct this one? I think he did. I think it's the third one that he did not direct. But this is kind of a Friday the 13th style franchise, if you will. You got Kane Hodder playing Victor Crowley, and this is the first movie in the franchise where Danielle Harris takes over the role of Mary Beth. I'm a big fan of Danielle Harris. I think she truly is a good actress, and she is a modern day scream queen, and she's awesome. So I love this movie, and I like all the movies in the Hatchet franchise. But if I had to pick one, like what's your favorite out of all four? There's actually four of them now. It would be this one. I really, really like it, and this is the one I tend to rewatch more so than the others. Um, really good movie. Again, I'm not really giving away on some of these. I'm not really giving away too much as far as plot because I want people to just go out and watch them. Because I recommend every movie that I'm showing you in this list. So next up is a movie that I haven't heard very many people talk about on YouTube much at all. Some people know about it, a lot of people don't, but it's kind of one of those hidden gem horror films that kind of slipped under the radar. And it's a horror comedy, but it's, how can I put this? It's a horror comedy and it's got funny parts in it, but it's also a creepy, freaky horror film too. And that is Highway to Hell, which stars, uh, let's see, Chad Lowe and Christy Swanson. And man, Christy Swanson was so pretty in this movie. But it's a really good movie. You've got this guy who, him and his girlfriend elope to Las Vegas. They get married, and well, they're going to get married, and before they can get married, um, this cop shows up out of nowhere, looking like that, takes the girl, in this case, Christy Swanson, and leaves with her and vanishes into thin air. And what ends up happening is the guy has to pursue and get her. And he basically, it's a cop from hell. And this is a really good movie. It's campy, it's cheesy, but it's also got some very strong horror elements. And it's a movie that I always enjoyed. And again, it's a movie I don't hear a lot of people talking about. Anyway, Highway to Hell. Let's see here. Yeah. Next is the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Need I say more? I love this movie. I just love it. The documentary feel that this movie has. It's just raw and brutal, and you actually don't see a lot of blood in this movie, like the original Halloween. When you watch this movie, you think when it's over, you've watched a bloodbath, but you actually haven't. There's not a whole lot. There's some gross visuals in it. So, there's some pretty gross stuff, but there's not a whole lot of blood and guts like everybody thinks there is in this movie. It's all subliminal. It's all in the mind. Great movie. The only thing about this movie that I can't stand is Franklin. And that's all I'm going to say. But great movie, though. From 1974. Let me see here. Okay, we're getting there. Okay, next on the list is Night of the Creeps. Kind of a Invasion of the Body Snatchers crossed over with a zombie movie. And of course, you've got Tom Atkins doing his thing. I love Tom Atkins, and this is a great movie. It's got a little bit of cheesy element to it, but it deals with these alien parasites, and it's a great movie. Again, I don't want to give away too much, but if you like 80s horror, or that type of horror that came out in the 80s, that's kind of creepy, scary, but kind of funny too. If you like the Friday the 13th and the Nightmare on Elm Streets and just all that kind of stuff, definitely check out this movie as well. Night of the Creeps. Awesome movie. Just a second. Let me see what we got here. Okay. Now, next on the list, this is the exception that I was talking about to the rule. This is another remake from the same franchise, and that's the remake of Night of the Living Dead. I think this remake is far superior to the original. It feels more like a straight up zombie film than the original did. I get what they were trying to do with the original, trying to be all like, making a social commentary on the political issues at the time and all that. Like I said, I get what they were trying to do with that, but I don't like it when movies try to get too symbolic, or they have some kind of agenda, and everything in the movie is supposed to represent something else because they're trying to like get across some political point or political agenda. I mean, that has its place, but I like movies that are more straight up. This is a zombie movie or whatever, and that's what this is. And the best part about this movie is that Tony Todd plays Ben. Uh, One of Tony Todd's best movies, if you ask me. And also, Bill Moseley plays um, what's his name? The brother. I forget his name right now, but the brother, from the original, that the first guy that gets attacked by a zombie and gets his head hit on a gravestone. That guy is played by Bill Moseley. This is one of the better remakes out there. I'm totally being honest. It really is a great remake from 1990. So it's been around a while. Okay, now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are the last 5. Now these are movies that I really like. So I mean, I like them all, but when you get down to the last 5, these are like cream of the crop for me. So, Pet Cemetery from 1989, and I have always liked this movie. It deals with tragedy. Uh, I think this is one of Stephen King's best uh, book to film adaptations, and it's directed by Mary Lambert, who also directed the sequel, Pet Cemetery 2, which I also like. But this is a great film. It's eerie. Uh, it's the music, the boys' choir that sings at the beginning uh, reminds me of Children of the Corn, kind of. And it's just very eerie, and it deals with people who have lost their animals. This movie is extremely eerie and very, very atmospheric. And like I said, it deals with tragedy and and ancient Indian burial ground and all these other really creepy elements. And then you've got this character uh, where my finger's touching, Pascal, with his head caved in. Only he's a ghost, but he's a good ghost. And this is just a really freaky movie. If you want to watch something really scary and unsettling, check this out because it's not funny at all. I mean, it's complete darkness. That movie. You'll and if you're depressed or in a bad mood, do not watch that movie. Is all I'm saying. Um, Next on the list is The Fog. Just a great spooky John Carpenter movie. Just a spooky old ghost story about a town that was built on blood money, essentially. And the people that were killed come back to get their money that was stolen from them, and they come back for revenge. You've got Tom Atkins, you've got Jamie Lee Curtis and Hal Holbrook and Adrienne Barbeau. Also, Charles Cyphers is in it, and it's just a great, like I said, a great old spooky ghost story. And if you pick up this edition, just look at all those special features on there. Anyway, I love The Fog, so it had to be on the list. Now, here's a movie some of you have heard of, and a lot of you haven't. And if you like the Phantasm films and you like Don Coscarelli, I highly, highly recommend that you go out and get this. If you can't get the Shout Factory Blu-ray, you can get it real cheap on DVD. You can get the DVD for like $3 or $4 on eBay. And that's Bubba Hotep. Very bizarre story to this movie, but very unique. You've got let me see here. Yeah, Don Coscarelli is directing. That's the guy who did the Phantasm films. You got Bruce Campbell from The Evil Dead playing an elderly Elvis in a nursing home, and Ozzie Davis, that man right there, playing a crazy guy who thinks that he is JFK, John F. Kennedy. And so the story with the Elvis character is that Elvis switched places with one of his impersonators, who's really good, like one of the best Elvis impersonators. And the Elvis impersonator assumed the identity of the real Elvis, and the real Elvis went off on his own to live a private life away from all the fame and fortune because he just couldn't take it anymore. But he took on the identity of the impersonator, even though he's the real Elvis. And then he had an accident, fell off the stage during one of his shows, and he messed up his hip. And long story short, he ends up in a nursing home, and that's where the movie starts. And there's this mummy, a soul sucking mummy that I won't tell you how the mummy gets there, but there's this mummy that shows up, and he has found the perfect place to hide out because there's all these elderly people in this nursing home, and he can steal their souls. And because they're old and weak, they're easy targets for him. And if you know anything about the real Elvis, Elvis ain't going to put up with that. And so Elvis and JFK, because that's who that guy thinks he is, they team up and decide to battle the mummy. And I won't tell you how it ends or anything like that, but it is a very unique horror film. And like I said, if you like the Phantasms, you'll love this movie. And this is definitely one of those movies I can watch this movie over and over and over and over, and it never gets old. And I love the music, and it's a comedy. It's kind of goofy, but it has heart, and it's actually a film that will get you teary eyed a few times here and there throughout it. It'll make you laugh. It'll make you cry. It'll be scary at times. There's a lot of supernatural elements, but I really like it. And I would just like to take this time to say that, you know, the real Elvis in real life died in 77 at the age of 42. And if Elvis had lived and had gotten old, I guarantee you he would have been just like the version of Elvis that is portrayed in this film by Bruce Campbell. I mean, Bruce Campbell, he's got a bigger chin than Elvis, but he's got the voice down. He's got the demeanor, the mannerisms, everything. If you want to know what old Elvis would have looked like had Elvis lived to be an old man, watch this movie. And I'm telling you, it's one of the best Elvis imitations that I've ever seen. And I love this film. So I'm not going to say anything else about it, but please, even if you don't watch any of the other films on this list, watch this one. It's really good. Bubba Hotep. Now we're getting down to the nitty gritty, the last two. So here it goes. It Follows. This is one of the best horror films I've ever seen in recent times. You've got this thing that follows people around, and it walks very slowly, very slow, but you pass this creature along to people by having sex. Very weird, but people have said this movie is a metaphor for STDs. I look at it as a metaphor of just death. From the moment you're born until the day you die, I don't mean this in an eerie way, but death is waiting for you. We all have a time and a place that everybody at some point will die. We don't know exactly when, but that's what the creature in this movie represented to me. Um, and This young girl goes on a date with this guy. She ends up having sex with him, but then he tells her there's this thing that's going to be following you, and if it gets you, it will kill you. So you have to keep moving. The advantage though is that this thing goes really slowly. It just walks. So you have a chance of outrunning it. But the way you get it to not chase you is have sex with someone else. And then it'll start chasing that person. So then you tell that person to have sex with somebody else. And but what happens is if you're the most recent person that thing is following, if it kills you, then it will go after the next person down in the chain. So the person that gave it to you, and then if it gets them, it'll get the person that gave it to them, and so forth. So you try to put as many people between you and it as you can. So it's weird. Um, Most horror films, it embraces a horror film trope while at the same time not embracing it, and that's if you have sex in a horror film, you're gonna die. Well, clearly, if you have sex in this film, it will kill you. But by to keep yourself alive, you have to keep having sex, or have the person you had sex with have sex with someone else. So the more people have sex, the farther away from it it will get from you, if that makes sense. Really bizarre film, but it's got a lot of John Carpenter atmosphere. I love the '80s synthesizer score it has, and I love um, the characters and the fact that the movie's so simple. It's not that complicated, um, and the just the music and the atmosphere, everything, and it feels like an '80s movie. But then there's a couple of scenes with cell phones and a few scenes with modern vehicles. But other than that, a couple of exceptions. Other than that, everything in this movie is like late '70s, early '80s feel. So if you like Gremlins, if you like any film from the '80s, horror films in particular, this will almost if nobody told you that this was a modern film and you just watched it, except for the cell phones and some of the cars that you'll see. Other than that, this movie feels like it was made in the 1980s. That's how good they did at replicating the 1980s in this film. It's a great movie. Highly, highly recommend it. It follows. And lastly, coming in at number one, Halloween 4. Now, I know you're going to say, well, how come you didn't put Halloween in the actual list? How come you mentioned Halloween as an honorable mention, but you didn't actually put it in the list? Well, because I like Halloween 4 better. It has a very similar setup to the first one. It um, everything that the original. I know everybody that's a diehard Halloween fan is going to be like, but to me, everything that the first film did and did good, this film did it better. Um, and I'm not a big fan of Jamie Lee Curtis, so I'm actually glad that he had a different person to pursue in this movie. And I like the dynamic between Daniel Harris and Ellie Cornell as sisters in the movie. It was believable to me. I like how the creepy security guard that gives the basically the rundown of what happened in Halloween 2. And I love this film because this is the one that brought Michael Myers back. Halloween 3 had nothing to do with the original storyline. No Michael Myers, none of that. And it was a complete flop. Now, there are people who are fans of it, but as far as the Michael Myers storyline, it was a flop. So Mustafa Akkad took over the rights and basically went back to the original formula that had worked in the first film, only he updated it for the 1980s. And Donald Pleasance comes back as Dr. Loomis, and Michael escapes during a prison transport in an ambulance and goes back to Haddonfield and is looking for his niece, most likely trying to kill her. And then you've got Bo Starr playing the new sheriff, Sheriff Meeker. And the one thing about this movie that I like a lot, I like a lot of stuff about this movie, but the one thing that shines in this movie above everything else, and this is the problem I have with the first one, Dr. Loomis shows up on the scene in the first film, and the idiot sheriff, in typical horror film fashion, I've seen this in so many horror films, I can't stand it anymore. It gets old because it's been done and done again. The sheriff is like, "Oh, you're crazy. We're, he doesn't take him seriously, and he doesn't take him seriously until people start getting killed." But what I like in this film is he shows up and the sheriff's like, "Yeah, I know who you are. Uh, I know exactly who you are." And Dr. Loomis tells him, Michael's escaped, this and that, blah, blah, blah. And guess what? The sheriff actually takes him seriously. I love horror films where people don't do stupid things. And none of the characters in this movie do stupid things. You watch this movie and you're like, it's a horror film. But contrary to typical horror film tropes, you think, oh, the characters are definitely going to do something stupid because it's a horror film. But they actually do things that you would actually do if you were really in this kind of a situation. And that's why I love Halloween 4. Halloween 4 is far superior over the first film to me any day. And another thing about the sheriff bracket from the original Halloween and Halloween 2 that I can't stand, it was in Halloween 2, this branches off of him not taking Loomis seriously. When he finally does start to take him seriously, the sheriff's daughter gets killed in the first one. And then in part 2, the sheriff gets mad at Loomis and he's like, "You let him out." And he keeps telling him that the whole movie, "You let him out, you let him out." And I'm like, you idiot. He did not let Michael Myers out. Michael Myers escaped because he escaped. Nobody let him out. That is so stupid. I don't understand why they didn't fix that in the script. I mean, it's stupid. This movie took everything. I mean, it's got some hokey scenes in it, but this movie takes itself far more seriously than the first two Halloweens. And the script is believable. What the characters do in the movie is believable, and they don't do stupid things. And this is probably the best of the sequels. I love 5 and I love 6 also for different reasons. But as far as this, if I had to pick one, this is the best sequel, and I love it. So Halloween 4. Now we're going to get into the last part of the video, my top 5 horror documentaries. First is To Hell and Back, about stuntman Kane Hodder, who has played various different horror slasher icons, Jason Voorhees being the main one. And he also played Victor Crowley, and he's played other characters too. But this is a story about how he was badly, badly burned when he was younger, and all the hell that he had to endure to recover problems he had with skin grafts and all. I could go on and on about this, but this is a great documentary. And if you're not, if you're a fan of Kane Hodder, you'll love this. And if you don't know who he is, or if you're not that big of a fan, watching this documentary will make you a fan. He was bullied as a kid. I mean, horrible, horrible stuff. And I admire the guy. He's awesome. And this, like I said, I don't want to give too much away, but this is about how he was burned and how he survived being burned. And it's a long, treacherous, brutal journey that he had to go through. But this is one of those other films that is sold by that website called Epic. The same website you can buy the movie Terrifier from. They sell this on there as well. And this is 106 minutes. So it's like an hour and 46 minutes. Great documentary. Highly, highly recommend it. You're gonna be crying at certain parts when you watch that, because I did. Also, Never Sleep Again. This is the Elm Street Legacy documentary, all about the making of the original Elm Street movies. I can't remember if they talk about the remake in this documentary or not. It's been a while since I've seen it, but this is a great, great documentary. Highly recommend it. And this documentary is 238 minutes. So you're going to be, if you're going to sit down and watch that in one sitting, you're going to be there a while. But it's great stuff. Another documentary I highly recommend is You're So Cool, Brewster, the story of Fright Night. But it's actually the story of Fright Night and Fright Night Part 2, the original first two films. This documentary is 350 minutes. I love this stuff. So there's that. And another documentary that won't surprise you, Crystal Lake Memories. All about the making of the Friday the 13th films up to this point. Originally, there was a book by the same name, and that's kind of what this movie, or documentary rather, is based upon. And this documentary is 400 minutes. So great stuff. Great stuff. When I am not feeling like watching an actual horror film, but I want to watch something horror related, I pop in one of these documentaries. And my top most recommended horror documentary is Halloween 25 Years of Terror, all about the making of the Halloween franchise. And I really love this movie or documentary. This documentary is 84, it's only 84 minutes, but it is a solid 84 minutes. And they talk about all the different Halloween sequels up to I think, I don't remember. They get up to H2O and Resurrection. I think that's they talked about all the films up to Halloween Resurrection. But it is a great documentary, and I love it. I watch this documentary more than I watch any other one that I have, but I love it, and I hope that sometime soon that they put out a new documentary that's longer, like an updated documentary, just a completely new one where they talk about the making of all of the movies in the franchise, because this documentary is kind of old. It came out when they had only done up to 8 films. Now there's the two Rob Zombie remakes, and there's um, the new one, Halloween 2018. So, and is it just me, or who would not like to see a documentary all about the Dr. Loomis character, his legacy throughout that franchise? Because that those movies have never been the same since he died for real in real life. I would love to see an updated Halloween documentary all about the making of the films, and I would also love to see a documentary all about the Dr. Loomis character and Donald Pleasance and his contributions and his involvement in the franchise, spanning all the sequels that he was in. And believe me, they could make a feature length documentary out of that. I would love to see that. But those are my top 20 horror films. An honorable mention at the beginning, and my top 5 horror documentaries. Um, I know the video was long, but I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you guys next time. What are some of your favorite horror films and horror documentaries? Um, Mention them in the comments. I'd be very interested to see those.